All right, the last episode, The Murmering, directed by Jennifer Kent, the director of The Babadook and The Nightingale. Two films I think are fantastic. This film stars Essie Davis from, of course, The Babadook, and Andrew Lincoln from Walking Dead. And this is about two ornithologists. Isn't that what they are?
Ornithologist. Wait.
No, ornithologists.
Ornithologist.
Yeah, because they're into ornithology. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce that.
I think you're right.
Yes. Anyways, so they get some funding from this very generous, wealthy family that is donating to their project to study these birds that only really nest in this one location on this island. So they're gifted this camera. This takes place in 1951. And they go to this island where they are studying the migration patterns of these birds and what they call the murmuring and these flight patterns. And they're trying, they're scientists. They're trying to figure out why birds do what they do and how they communicate with one another and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And while they're there, they're dealing, spoilers of course, people, they're dealing with a loss. I called it instantly, like I always do. Something was said and I was like, they lost a kid.
Yeah.
And of course they did. So, okay. They get there, the place is haunted, and she's kind of dealing with that, but the real horror tragedy of this is this broken relationship after loss, mm-hmm. right? This episode's about grief and your inability to process it and how important it is to properly grieve so that you can move on and find happiness after misery. And honestly, I mean, that kind of sums up the entirety of this. While I do think that this is a very important message, and I do think it's beautifully shot and wonderfully acted as expected. It feels out of place in this television series with everything else that we got. Mm-hmm. This just feels tonally so different that it feels like it should be part of something else. And I'm honestly surprised this isn't just another Jennifer Kent film exploring grief, because that is something she loves to explore in her films, whether it's The Babadook with the loss of Essie Davis's character's husband and her dealing with her kid, or The Nightingale with a woman dealing with rape and whatnot. So that there is a lot of like trauma and grief and how people deal with it in their different ways. But yeah, I mean, I do think it's a very pretty movie with some very heavy subject matter. The horror is super light.
Yes.
It's there, right?
It's there.
But it is 95% drama, and I just don't think this is the audience they're going after.
I agree with you. I mean, I liked the episode. I enjoyed it. I thought, like, as you said, it was beautifully shot. The acting was wonderful. I was invested in, like, the story and the relationship between the husband and wife. I was there for all of it, but it did feel very out of place. It felt like a very bizarre episode to decide to close the series on. I could see the last episode, the viewing, being, the final episode for this season. But it does have mild horror elements. I think that for people who like really slow burn, and it's not, I wouldn't say that it's super subtle, but the haunted house and the haunting as a metaphor for grief and all of that, I think if you enjoy those types of themes, that you would enjoy this episode. But it is a big change of pace from the others.
Well, we're talking spoilers, so I mean, I'm hoping they've already watched it.
Yeah.
But if you're just trying to get
right.
us,
yeah,
if you're trying to get us to convince you, and you're like, I don't care about spoilers. I just, I didn't really have any interest in it. If you're worried about this being too slow or whatever, then yes, it is going to be that way for you, I would assume. But yeah, I mean, really all you have here is you have a husband and wife that went through something terrible. They've buried themselves in their work. The husband is trying to move on. He clearly loves his wife, and his wife is unable to move on, and it's putting an enormous strain on their relationship. You always expect that because we're so accustomed to horror tropes and what we're used to, that you always expect this story and elements in it and scenes and whatnot to go in places that they never do. You think something's going to happen with the husband, with the bird whistles and whatnot as their call signs for when they contact one another. You think that's going to play into it and this and that. And it's like, no, really, this is just like, her finding out about the history of this house and, finding out that this woman had killed her child and then killed herself. And in the end, this is enough for her to open up to her husband and start healing. And that's it. It's a very straightforward. There's it is insanely. There's such an insane contrast between the last episode, the viewing. And this episode, where you have this insanely trippy, wild, drug-induced mania that's filled with ambiguity and all sorts of different interpretations of whatever the hell this and that means. And then you get this very slow burn, classic, gothic kind of horror story that mostly deals with drama and it's a very straightforward, obvious metaphor. It was weird watching them back to back.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was.
So, yeah, Rick Grimes and Essie Davis here were great, but man, I just think that this was a bad decision to put it in this series, because I think that after someone is like watching The Autopsy and is like really looking for that horror punch, they're going to get to this. Now, will this appeal to some people? Absolutely. I think this would be a really cool episode to show someone who likes more of like traditional classic horror stories that are more drama centric and don't feature any gore or any jump scares or any of those kinds of things. This is like kind of those like hauntingly beautiful type classic films.
It's all about like the tone and the atmosphere and the the dialogue and the emotions between characters.
Yeah, I mean, but as I said, like there's nothing to interpret here. That I saw.
Very straightforward.
Kaylee was trying to suggest that, like, she was the one who actually killed her kid, and then he brought her there to, like, finally deal with it. And it's like, oh no, we're not going Shutter Island route here.
That's what I thought.
We're just straightforward. Your kid died. You can't deal with it. You now have tapped into some other death of a child, and once you solve that mystery and are able to embrace that child as it runs into her arms and vanishes, which was really sad.
That whole thing was very sad when he's just like, I'm cold.
Sure, and that reminded me of the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode with the cold ghost. But yeah, I mean, and then she just calls her husband on the radio and is just like, I'm ready to talk about our child now. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And it's just credits. And I was like, okay, this is so not what I was expecting this to be at all, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, your expectations should never get in the way of your enjoyment of something. It just does feel out of place. But it's well directed. Yeah. It's well acted. I definitely would have much preferred this to have more horror. That's what this is missing. This is missing more haunting right? But that is bias coming from a horror fan looking for horror in this. So there is some kind of preconceived notions there. Maybe it's perfect as is for what, I'm sure this is what she wanted to do.
Yeah.
But
sure.
for me, my personal tastes, this exploration of grief and an inability to move on could have been explored just as well, while also giving the audience a little bit more scare for their buck.
I agree. Yeah.
So that's really it. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I definitely thought we were going to get more focus on, like, how the birds were irrelevant.
Sure, I thought
right?
that there was going to be some stuff with them, but it really was just, again, they were a metaphor for her freedom, and especially freedom from grief and everything. So I don't think that there was a deeper meaning to it.
Well, it's like the birds were drawing her there to free her.
Yes.
Right?
But there was
She sees them as freedom, and then she follows them, and they lead her to freedom.
Yeah, I thought that there was going to be some shapes or something made by the Murmur.
Oh, sure.
Some message or whatever, especially because she does, we do get, when she's listening to the bird calls and the birds, she does hear things through listening to them, so I did think that would have more to do with it, but really I do think it was very well done. I don't dislike it at all. It just felt out of place is really my main critique. I mean, I would have liked more of the horror, as you were saying, like to kind of up the scares a bit, but as it is, though, I still think that it's a really solid episode. I think that it's very well done.
If you want an example of what I'm talking about, to do it very similarly to how this was done, but to add more horror, and it doesn't have to be overt, it doesn't have to be exaggerative, it doesn't have to be insane, it's just more. That adds to the tension, and it adds to the payoff of like finally hitting that moment where they realize like the point of this or that. Watch something like The Woman in Black. I think that you got that gothic kind of countryside where you go off to this like isolated house where you find out about this death of a child and a woman and the grief, and you're dealing with your own family issues and whatever. There's more going on there. So I just if you could have made this into a feature and made it 20 minutes longer, and all 20 minutes of that actually be like horror,
sure,
I think this could have been really great. But it's just it's a little too light on the horror for my tastes, but otherwise well done. So that's it. So Cabinet of Curiosities as a whole, a big win.
Yes.
It has peaks and valleys for sure. It started very, very strong for us. The first 4 episodes were all hits. And then episodes 5 and 6 were fine. Then 7 was very cool, albeit confusing as.
Yeah, and then this
one, which was what we just said. So,
yes.
Overall, I very much want to see a second season for sure.
Yeah. I love getting different directors, to tell different stories. The anthology series for horror in this way works really, really well. And I really want to see more in a season 2.
Yeah. So, that's that.
Yeah.
And we apologize for getting to this a little later, but our marriage came first.
Yeah. We don't apologize.
No, we don't apologize.
But we're back.
But we are back, and look forward to plenty more content in the future. And while you're here, and you're looking for all that content in the future, you might as well subscribe.
Yeah,
right?
And like this video.
Yeah, comment.
And talk to us, yeah.
Yeah, make sure when you comment, you just do like 1 or 2 words, then you space, And use inside joke.
Yes.
I didn't even like say it right.
No.
So it's not really. I didn't do that well.
Inside joke.
Inside joke. All right, guys. Yeah, check out the TikTok, the Patreon for our watch parties. You know, blah blah blah. The whole spiel. It's in the description below. You guys are wonderful.
We're tired.
We are.
We're gonna go to bed.
Bye.